where he's at.
Some very disturbing new information to report tonight on Wednesday's assassination attempt on GOP lawmakers. Fox News can confirm that authorities found a list of 6 names of Republican members of Congress in a van belonging to James Hodgkinson, the left-wing gunman who opened fire at practice for the annual congressional baseball game. The news adds to the mountain of evidence that Hodgkinson specifically targeted Republicans when he went on his shooting spree, wounding 5, including House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, who remains hospitalized and in critical condition. Representative Trent Franks of Arizona was one of the names on Hodgkinson's list. Martha McCallum asked him about it tonight.
There are certainly many indications now that the shooter was premeditated in his actions. I have been notified that there is an investigation and that, yes, that I might be involved in that investigation, but, you know, I certainly can't go any further than that.
Can you imagine, Greg, if you get this information and your family members and hearing this and that your name was on a list and here this guy was just opening, you know, like shooting pinballs, guns at people, trying to take as many people down as possible, and you're one of those intended targets.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard about this. Some thoughts. Who was not on the list were the cops who killed him. So we have to be reminded that if they weren't there, everybody would have been killed. Yeah. He had a list. He was determined. And so I still believe we should act as if that's the reality, that the cops weren't there, so we remind ourselves what we missed, what could have happened. And when you look at this perpetrator, he flies in the face of the media-approved stereotype. He's an older white man with a gun. He should be a redneck Nazi. He should be a Fox viewer in a red hat that says, "Make America Great Again." But sorry, he's a left-wing MSNBC watcher.
At this hour, too. All right, so Dana, what do you make of this information? It's important that they have security, especially because of the succession in terms of a majority whip position, et cetera. But wow, and they didn't say that Steve Scalise was on the list.
Right, and perhaps, well, I don't know if he is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, because all the members that were on that list were the
Tea Party.
House Freedom Caucus, and I don't know if Scalise was a member of that party. So it obviously wasn't random. And so he knew what he was doing, and this idea that he comes to the baseball field and says, are those Republicans or Democrats they're practicing? I would imagine he actually probably knew that, and perhaps we'll find out more. The one thing about security for these members of Congress is very interesting. So only the leadership is actually afforded 24-hour security, because imagine trying to provide 24-hour security for 535 members of Congress. One of the things that members of Congress have been asking, and Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn was talking about this the other day, that they have asked the Federal Election Commission for permission to use some of their campaign funds to supplement security for times when they feel like they might need it, like at a town hall meeting or at someplace where they're meeting with constituents, or if they're out in the open where they feel like they need it. And the FEC is sort of, I don't think they haven't said no, but they've sort of been dragging their feet on it. But it seems like, to me, that if it would give some members of Congress some confidence to be able to go out and do their work, that would not be taxpayer-funded dollars. They would have to make a decision to use campaign funds to pay for that. I feel like the FEC should go ahead and approve that, at least in the interim, to give people some confidence, because I'm sure that other members of Congress think they're probably on other lists out there. Hopefully that's not true, but if you don't have any other way of protecting yourself, I think this seems reasonable to me.
I think it's reasonable. I think it's a good idea, and better to be safe than sorry, because certainly there's a fact pattern here, one that warrants perhaps letting them do this and making this accommodation in the interest of legitimate public safety and personal safety for our elected officials.
Well, of course. I mean, you want to have security. The interesting and the difficult situation here is, take the White House. Now you can't even drive down Pennsylvania Avenue. You don't have access. The Capitol is, I mean, that's supposed to be basically a Congress. The American people are supposed to be able to go in there, talk to their elected officials. In recent years, they've made some changes in terms of meeting space by creating that Capitol Visitor Center that so many people may now be familiar with. It's actually underground, but that's where so many of the meetings with constituents take place. And then in the last 2 days since the shooting, Kimberly, you've had meetings between Speaker Ryan and the Minority Leader Pelosi about added investment in security, specifically the Capitol Police, just having more Capitol Police on the grounds and potentially, as Dana was discussing, at some of these town hall meetings. But The question is, how far do you go with security? Because we're an open society and it's a democracy, and you want to be able to speak to your representative.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And a lot of them were making, you know, that exact argument, which I think is an important point. And then you find out that there's lists with people on it, Jesse, and you say, whoa, am I on a list somewhere? You know, that's the problem.
Yeah, I think having a list crystallizes how partisan of an attack this was. There's really no getting around it anymore. It was a partisan political assassination attempt. And this guy watches MSNBC. The guy, you know, was a campaign volunteer for Bernie Sanders. Imagine if it was a Trump volunteer who watched Fox News Channel. Just trying to think of the reaction if it had been the other way, and just trying to highlight some of the hypocrisy. It almost seems like today the media kind of wants to move on from this story. I was watching a lot of the cable news today. I was reading a lot of the paper, and there's a real appetite to say, you know what, we talked about it, we had the baseball game, let's move on to Russia.
Yeah.
I don't think that would happen if it was the other way around, and it's not time to move on. I think it's time for some soul-searching among everybody, but especially on the left, to say, what are we doing out here? Are we accessories? Are we inciting? These people out there now on social media, if you're not having any boundaries on social media and you're not doing it to someone's face and you're doing it anonymously and there's a million of you and you're trafficking in this same kind of bile, it makes it feel acceptable to slander someone or encourage violence against someone, because there's really no barriers there. And then when you get out into the real world and start pulling triggers, that's the problem. There's no division between the reality of real life and stuff on the internet.
I mean, there is an argument for the fact that if you create an outlet for that, then you reduce the reality of it happening on the streets.
Perhaps.
If the internet was around in the 80s, in the 70s, would John Lennon be alive because Mark David Chapman would have been harassing him from far away rather than traveling to New York? We don't know that. It's a hypothetical.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the security question. There was a story today about a Tennessee homeowner who caught those two inmates who killed those prison guards. He held them. He was a citizen with a gun. He held both of these incredibly dangerous murderers on the ground until the police came. He was a Texas homeowner. I'm bringing this up in this story to illustrate that guns save lives. Those guys were on the run. They were on the run. They'd murdered two prison guards. They were going to kill more. A homeowner with a gun prevented the deaths of others, the same way that those police officers, who may not have had to have been there if Scalise wasn't there, saved those lives. So where there is a gun, people's lives are saved.
Well, since you opened the discussion, because I think that we should honor the tragedy that take place, and I don't think that it's the appropriate time to have a discussion about gun control, but far more people who have guns kill themselves, kill their friends and family. And to me, it's the idea that professionals with guns act in a way that protect us.
Oh, absolutely. And legal gun owners, I'm sorry, Juan, legal gun owners are professional.
No,
they are. They can, you're smearing people who own guns right now.
I'm not smearing anybody.
You're saying that they can't handle a gun.
I'm saying
every gun owner I know trains and goes to the range.
Okay, in this case, what we have here is someone who had a permit from the state of Illinois.
Shouldn't have had it.
Oh, well, that's my point.
No,
you said every gun owner is trained and a professional.
No, that wasn't your point.
This guy is.
You said only professionals should have guns.
Yes, I think
that's wrong.
Police. But here's my point. You have a situation where this guy is given a gun permit, and I think if you looked into his background, if that witness had shown up in the domestic abuse case, he wouldn't have been able to get it. But he gets it, and then he perpetrates this horror. And by the way, you know, we were talking about the partisanship, and he had this list. You know, now there's several Democratic candidates who have said that they are not running because they have had threats against their lives and that they're scared. They live in fear. You talk about not getting good people into public life.
Who's threatening them, though? Other Democrats? Or could it be Hillary versus Bernie?
Let's not get into it, but I'm saying they're deranged. There are a lot of deranged people who take any opportunity, any cause. They've aligned themselves with something, and then all of a sudden, we, having a political discussion, want to attribute blame to one side or the other.
Okay, but today we also got an update on House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, and he's on everybody's mind. And doctors say that he is still in critical condition, but miraculously, somehow, they think he will make an excellent recovery, even though he arrived at the hospital Wednesday at imminent risk of death. President Trump said these touching words about the congressman earlier.
My dear friend, Steve Scalise, took a bullet for all of us. And because of him and the tremendous pain and suffering he's now enduring, and he's having a hard time, far worse than anybody thought, our country will perhaps become closer, more unified, so important. So we all owe Steve a big, big thank you.
All right, so Dana, that was very nice commentary, and this is someone who was very good to President Trump and candidate Trump when he was running for office.
Well, I'd like
a public statement.
Yeah, and I think that President Trump actually would have been like this with any member of Congress, whether they had supported him or not. I'd like to believe that. I also feel like this is the week where he found out what it's like to be the comforter-in-chief for a nation. It won't be the first time that he has to play that role. Unfortunately, he knows that there will be other times to come, but I think he set a really good example and a high bar for himself today.
Excellent. Jesse?
There is a New Jersey Democratic political strategist named Devine who actually said this. He said he has little sympathy for Scalise because of his lack of support for gun control. Also tweeted, "We are in a war with selfish, foolish, and narcissistic rich people. Why is it a shock when things turn violent? Hashtag hunt Republican congressman." 48 hours after the shooting, the guy's hashtagging hunt Republican congressman. I can't even believe it.
He'll probably get hunted on
He
Twitter.
cannot be hired again.
That's awful.
I mean, ever again. Awful, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. All right, you have a final comment?
Well, I think that one of the stories that isn't brought up enough is medical expertise. The reductions in homicides are directly related to new, improved surgery, new, improved techniques. If you had the same medical technology as you did in the 70s, we always talk about our declining homicide rate. One of the reasons is because we're saving people.
Saving casualties in wars.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where they learned it, I think, is the battlefield is where they learned it. Yep. So, I mean, we don't want to get deceived by the fact that, well, some cities the homicide rate's still going up and other ways it's going down. But a lot of it is the reductions are because we're just better at saving lives. It's interesting.
All right. And protecting